And welcome back to MGD 111, Photoshop 1. Today we're going to look at what is Photoshop exactly. Well, Photoshop is basically a way to take an image that has been processed by a computer and manipulate it in various ways. I know it sounds very simple, but what exactly is the heart of Photoshop? Well, here's an image that was shot with a digital camera. Usually we start with something that was either shot by camera or scanned. We can start with something from scratch, but we're going to cover that later. But basically what happens is this image from the real world is digitized and broken into pixels. And if I zoom in, by the way, Command plus allows you to zoom in and zoom in further, you start to see that this image is breaking down into little boxes. Well, those little boxes, those squares, are called pixels. Now, your screen is made out of millions and millions of pixels, but so is your photo. So each of these squares is exactly one color, and one color only. You can't have stripes inside of pixels, you can't have polka dots, you can't have any sort of gradation. What Photoshop does is it averages out an image and says, okay, inside this square, what's the average color? The more pixels you have available, the more you can do with that. And all we're doing, ultimately, all we're doing with this entire thing is we are taking various tools and we are just changing the color of some of our pixels. And that's all we're doing. Now it looks like we're doing some more amazing things. We're going to do things where we delete things, blur things, filter things, cause all kinds of crazy effects. But ultimately all we're doing is just assigning different color values to each of these pixels. So whenever we're using an image in Photoshop, sometimes we want to zoom out so we can see it nice and clearly, so it looks like what we want to see. And sometimes we need to zoom in a little bit so we can access individual pixels or precisely move in a certain area. Photoshop allows us to manipulate the entire photo if we like, or we can also use various selection tools to highlight just a certain portion of the picture, either a very sharply defined portion of the picture, or one that has some sort of vague fuzzy boundaries even if we want to blend things in. And then we can manipulate just the parts of the picture that fall inside that area. So we're going to spend the entire semester learning how to do that. But that's all there really is to Photoshop. So every image that you have is going to be based on pixels. If you've ever used Illustrator, Illustrator handles images a little bit differently. It works with vectors. It's basically mathematical lines. There are some tools in here that use those vectors, but ultimately every single thing is built out of pixels. It's kind of like a giant box of Legos, and all we're doing is taking out this beige Lego here and putting a red one in its place. Sounds pretty simple, and in some ways it is. In some ways it might be a little more challenging, but we're going to learn throughout the semester how to manipulate those things in some pretty cool ways. So that's basically an introduction to what is Photoshop. Thanks.